please introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
Okay, my name is Jonas Schoelynck, and I'm a professor of aquatic ecology at the University of Antwerp in Belgium. And I mainly research, well, aquatic ecology, but specifically focused on freshwater ecosystems.
In your work, are you working with freshwater restoration as well? And do you have any projects that you would like to share your experiences with us?
Sure, my research is divided into fundamental research on the one hand, and then on applied research on the other hand. But the fundamental it always leads to some new knowledge that can be applied really in the field. And there are well, a couple of projects we're working on here, but they all have to do with giving space back to the river, basically. So we're talking about remeandering projects in the upper part of the rivers, but also on the recreation of tidal marshes in the estuary, for instance, where then at the downstream part of the river, where again more space is given to water. And both projects firstly initiated from a safety perspective with climate change. So most of the rivers they flush the water really rapidly downstream towards the ocean. We want to keep more water upstream to overcome droughts, for instance, or to prevent floodings downstream. And therefore, we do these remeandering projects to slow down the flow of the water and to increase the capacity of the valley, for instance, to maintain some water. And at the downstream part in the estuary, it's a bit vice versa. Here we want to prevent again floodings of the cities that live of the people that live in cities in the estuaries from storm surges, for instance, or sea level rise, or when these big flash floods from upstream enter the estuary, for instance. And here we give space back by the embankment, for instance, and recreating tidal nature. So the safety point of view is always the first incentive, but then again, you could achieve this by doing some hard concrete structures, for instance, as well. But we opt to achieve these goals through nature recreation because then you can have the benefits of nature as well, and that's them building with nature, if you would like to call it. So this is always behind to optimize the investments of the government into, well, achieving the safety, but also achieving higher nature values in terms of water quality, for instance, and nature values.
Thank you. So talking about the government, would you say the funding for your project and research is mostly national, or is it also European, regional?
Yeah, so the projects I just talked about are national funding. Yeah, but there are similar cases, for instance, life projects that have been granted, which is more on the EU level, that kind of well, try to achieve similar goals of nature restoration, always in combination with water quality improvement and giving space back to water to flow. But the cases now were just national funding. Yeah.
Would you say your government is so therefore more pro natural, let's call them nature-based solutions maybe, instead of the concrete measures for flood risk reduction, for example? Would you say it's coming from the national level, or do you also think, for example, the Water Framework Directive or some other legislation is also putting some effort in this?
I think both, but actually, like 30 years ago, for instance, this was really not on the table, and mainly here in Belgium, and that was my previous professor. He retired recently. He was really on the forefront of talking to the government, saying we should do something about it, but it should be done in an inclusive way, including also nature restoration. And it took him, well, 20 years, for instance, to achieve that level of understanding at the governmental level. And first, they tried on small scale, for instance, this tidal marsh restoration on small scale. Okay, we will try to do it in your way, and let's see how it evolves and if it's manageable. But it turned out to be a really great way of achieving both goals, safety on the one hand and nature restoration on the other hand, that the government completely was completely convinced of this new insight and this new way of thinking that these days it's automatically in their decision making. And of course, it helps that EU legislation, for instance, is also pushing local governments, for instance, for water quality, but also the day-to-day reality of climate change and of big water bombs falling on certain regions in Europe, or the big droughts that we again face this year, are also kind of pushing national government to really take action. Not only for safety, but also for nature
Mhm.
restoration.
So basically, it was kind of like showing the best practice on a smaller scale that certain things can work. And then you also have some pressure from outside, which is like climate change and new
Yeah,
extreme weather conditions. Yeah.
yeah, that's how it goes. And I think everybody involved nowadays is convinced in one way or another that nature recreation in these conditions, well, just adds up to the benefits of your investments in the project.
Mhm.
You will get your safety level
Mhm.
without too many extra costs, but you get many more benefits from it, which adds up. Um, and then yeah, this is then easily convincing people.
Oh, okay, because that would have been my next question. Since you said most of your projects are focusing on giving space to water or rivers again, is there any kind of conflict regarding what land can be used because or space can be used again for the river, which might have been used for agriculture or some other
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, that's always the tension. Yeah. So in most cases, indeed, it's agricultural land that is given back to the river, basically, or to nature. Um, of course, these farmers or the owners of the land are compensated for it, and it goes through kind of legal ways. And in the end, I hope they are satisfied with their compensation. I have no say in that, so I cannot give any information on that. But on the other hand, sometimes it's also um, uh, land that was also already property of nature NGOs, for instance, or from the government itself, and then it goes much easier.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
again, in the end, there is always this need to do it, eh? Because if the government is not giving space back to the river, cities will be flooded next year or in 10 years, but they will flood with major economic costs. Or the drought is another thing, and the drought also affects agriculture.
Mhm.
So, yeah, things have to be done, and I
Yeah.
think all parties involved are agreeing to at least listen and to find mutual solutions. And yeah, that's how
Yeah.
it
Yeah. In
comes
the
up.
long run. Yeah, definitely. Um, okay, maybe in general, um, as your personal experience, based on your personal experience, what do you see as the one of the main challenges when it comes to freshwater restoration projects, in your opinion?
Hmm.
You can even name like different aspects as well
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
don't have
yeah.
the
Just,
main one.
just, just thinking something that is not conflicting my previous answer. Uh, well, there's two aspects, or basically there's three aspects. One aspect is indeed space, what we mentioned already, and that is indeed, well, very difficult because the space is limited, and even though you could negotiate with the previous owner and that's then satisfied, it's if you really want to do it in a completely natural way, you need a lot more space than there is available right now because there is industry, there's people living, there's things. So it's always the measures we try to take, or that the government tries to take, and that we research, is a combination of engineered structures and nature development. So it's not just giving space back and opening the previous dikes and let it happen. No, there is always some sort of control to optimize the goals on the available space. And this also requires compromises sometimes, but also requires really good knowledge of the ecosystem to know, yeah, okay, we can let loose these two parameters because they will develop themselves, but the other parameters we need to manage a bit more to attain the right level of success, for instance. So this is a challenge. And then the second challenge is time. Unfortunately, all these projects take a lot of time from the decision, or maybe the conceptual phase, then the decision, buying all the land, implementing all of that. It really takes a lot of time, and at some point we don't really have that time anymore because the consequences of climate change are hitting right now, also in Belgium. So that's also a pressing thing. And then, well, third, because I think that's all your respondees will have answered, that is money.
Yeah.
It costs a lot of money to do this and a lot of money to research this. Luckily, our government is, I'm sorry, our government is supporting these ideas and is giving quite some grants for studying this sort of research. But yeah, research itself costs a lot of time, money, and manpower, and to do it in a good way, well, yeah, it often exceeds the budget, of course. So that's a constraint. But also for the building phase, you can, if us as researchers come up with, well, this and this and this should be done,
Mm.
well, then the government's there. Okay, this is the budget. So now
Yeah.
where we can find each other
Limiting
uh,
factor.
to let it happen. So that's a third constraint. But I guess that's in all of the cases you
Yeah.
will meet.
Yeah.
Mm.
Unfortunately, yes. Um, Thank you. I think last but not least, if you have any last key messages or something that you want to share, feel free to share. Otherwise,
Yeah, what I think that is lacking, or maybe it's out there, but I am not aware of it, is that within Europe, and that's especially important for your project, we should learn more from each other.
mhm,
Because the things I talked about right now, we have them here. People can go and watch it, but very few people do. And the ones that do come to watch it, they're always super impressed, coming from Spain or from Poland or wherever, saying, "Wow, if only we knew this solutions." 20 years ago, we would have done things differently, and also vice versa. I'm pretty sure there's things out there in Spain or Poland or wherever that we could also learn from. But and yeah, reading about it is nice. I think your movies will again lower that level of interaction. But I think the real field visit, like watching these projects and seeing how they are being done, yeah, that really, at least for me, is always an eye opener. So if that could be more supported in one way or another, I think within Europe we can. But there's a lot of to be learned from each other still, I think.
very true. Thank you for these last words.
Perfect.
Okay. I think we're good.